Hello everyone, and welcome to my development slash testing world for DataPacks. Basically, I just wanted to give you a quick run around how I'm keeping track of the changes that I'm making and give you an idea of what changes I have made so far. Kind of let you know what some of these different colors mean, show you how I keep track of it all. Anyways, just going to start off with the pack that I added first. This is kind of an interesting one. I've actually been learning PowerShell in order to make this data pack a lot easier to create. There's a lot of different blocks that these apply to, and to go in and manually alter each one would be very time consuming. So but basically, yeah, the recipe is on the front. The recipe it's replacing is on the back. The yellow block is just my way of telling myself that I have already done it. The red meaning I have not implemented it yet. And then green would be fully tested. So that's something I haven't quite done here yet, is set up the testing to make sure that it's worked for every recipe that I intended it to. But then also up on top, this is the item to be acquired in order to unlock the recipe. So in order to unlock, in this case, the slab, you would need to pick up the block first, like the corresponding block. And, you know, that's fairly straightforward on some of these, but then on other ones, because of how I've changed the recipe, I may have made it something that doesn't quite make sense. Like, I'm trying to find a really good example. So, yeah, I don't know what would be the best example of that. But I try to make it like the lowest tier of item that you would get. I guess this is a good example. The regular recipe for a lever is just cobblestone and a stick, not normally requiring redstone. Well, kind of the first item that comes to mind for a redstone component would be unlocking when you acquire redstone. But in this case, most players are familiar with the recipe that doesn't require redstone, so I just made it unlock when you acquire a stick. Something that you're obviously going to unlock way before that you even try to craft a lever. You'll get that recipe. And it's a simple recipe, so I believe it should unlock relatively early. But anyways, just kind of walking through what I have implemented so far. Slabs. These are my 2x2 crafting recipes. So these are my slabs, just 2 blocks side by side, and then there's a recipe up here as well, because that recipe by default would create a pressure plate. So I have to come up with another recipe for a pressure plate. And this gets all confusing really quick because the recipe that I would normally go for 2 slabs to make a pressure plate, I actually want to, and I've marked it here, I want to use that recipe for a trapdoor, or at least I've been playing around with that idea, and that's back here, which it looks like I haven't. Yeah, a lot of these things I'm still working on, which is why a lot of them are still red. But so I've got slabs, I've got 2x2 stairs, and something I've tried to do is keep the amounts consistent. So, you know, the quantity of wood to make 4 stairs. Oh, this is wrong. Oops. Okay. Yeah, I think I moved this over at one point and just forgot to remove that. But anyways, so 3 blocks, you know, you can count the amount of wood. There'd be a stair block there. That's 2, 3, and then a quarter from each one would be put together to give you a total of 4. So I try to do that, make sense of how much material is going into the recipe should be roughly equal to the amount coming out of the recipe. This is my 2x2 for fences. Makes sense to me. You've got a pole and then your cross beams. Pole and cross beams. And then the fence gate is slightly different. The idea here is that you have a hinge with a flat door on one side and then a hinge with your door on the other side. It's kind of an interesting one because it doesn't completely resemble it, but I got to find something for the 2x2 consistency. And then there's no cobblestone sticks, so I go for the half slabs. And considering each fence or each wall when you place it down, I mean, that looks like half a block worth of material to me, so that's kind of what I went with. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 half blocks. And that's actually one that I have not implemented yet because, like I said, I'm using PowerShell, and this is actually a really interesting recipe to change because it requires the most changes to the file itself. Like it goes from having 1 ingredient to 2 ingredients. So I have to do a lot more work to the file, and I just haven't sat down to do that yet. Some of the other 2x2, this is slabs back to blocks, so it's like the uncrafting recipe of the 2 here. So these are the uncrafting, and again, it keeps all the amounts. 4 stairs would turn into 3 blocks, And then I have this separated off. Like I have those in a group, and then I have these in a group. This is, again, it's 2x2 crafting, but these ones are a little bit more interesting. None of them have been implemented. I will do this relatively soon. But it's really nice to be able to craft this kind of stuff on the fly without needing a crafting table. You got signs. Some of these are a little bit odd, or I'm still trying to work out how I want to do this. Like, for example, this is the normal recipe for sticks. So in order to craft sticks, you just break down a block. It's I don't know. It's not ideal, or maybe it is. A lot of these are kind of still in the air for me, but it makes sense. You have two blocks that you stack on top of each other, and then you just cut it into, you see there I have 4. You just cut it into 4 slices, so you get 4 doors. And then same kind of idea here. You slice the half slab down the middle, and you get 2 smaller pieces. So it's about half. So I figured that was a pretty good recipe. And then, as you can see, I have other notes here. I want to basically overwrite this recipe with a more challenging one. If you have the challenging recipes, DataPack. Again, this is in progress. This one's tough because I'm trying to figure out how to balance these two so that it makes sense in terms of quantity. Obviously, 2 iron blocks making 4 doors matches with the wood recipe, but then how do I make a iron trapdoor? Well, one idea that I was playing around with was just putting an iron door into the crafting grid so that it just cuts it in half. That would be the best way to keep the amount of iron going into each of these equivalent. But then the downside to that method would be, in order to create an iron trapdoor, you have to create 4 iron doors, which requires 2 blocks of iron. So you need 18 ingots before you can craft a single trapdoor. And I really don't like that. So what I was thinking is kind of going the opposite way. Having 4 iron make an iron trapdoor, and then maybe combining 2 trapdoors to get a full door. And that way you only need 8 iron ingots to make a single door. The downside to this would be, in order to craft a lot of iron doors, it's a lot of crafting, just because it's a 2-step crafting recipe to get to that point. But considering this is the recipe, it just makes iron doors a little bit more expensive. But when you consider this recipe, 2 more iron ingots makes a full door. It wasn't quite balanced, and yeah, I'm trying to make the amounts more realistic, because that's just something I like. Again, this is something I need to implement, because I have this recipe that I want to use in order to recraft slabs into blocks. There are certain recipes that require this recipe, the 2 slabs, in order to make like the chiseled version of blocks, or I can't remember if there's a pillar that does it. But basically I want to make these types of block stonecutter only. They're very decorative, and in my mind I see it as being, requiring a special tool in order to get the special block. And then this is just a consistency thing. Not all the blocks I think are like this, and I just want them to be so like 2x2 of the base block. So in this case it would be a regular quartz block. 2x2 gives you the brick version, and that would also go for stone bricks. The red bricks, I'm not sure how I want to handle that yet. I might just leave it as is. I might play with the quantity though. But anyways, so that's kind of my 2x2. I'm also barely getting started on the glass section, how I want to handle that. I think what I currently have is a single glass block in the crafting grid gets split into 4 panes, and then there's no option to recraft. But this is what I would consider a challenge data pack. Basically, it makes all the recipes, not necessarily all, it makes a lot of the recipes more difficult to craft. And I actually just experienced this, and at first I kind of had mixed feelings. Like, it was a little bit off-putting having to it's the note block that I'm talking about, and I'll get to that in a second. But basically I had to run in circles trying to get some of these things together for a project in my Let's Play world, and it took me a lot longer to build some of these things than I was expecting because of the strange requirements. So just kind of want to go over what these are so you can know what I'm going through as I'm crafting some of these things up in my Let's Play world. So instead of a stick, it requires a torch, because when you put a torch down, it's lit. It's a lit torch. It makes sense that it would be on fire, basically. So it just makes it a little bit harder, and it's a 1-for-1 recipe. I have mixed feelings about that, but just because of the amount of redstone, I wish that the redstone would go further, but I do like that 1 torch makes 1 torch, so that's how I'm going to leave it. And then this is a button recipe. It makes 8 buttons, so the redstone goes a lot further in this case, but at the same time you have to press it in order to get it to turn on, so a lot less redstone. It just creates a small spark is kind of how I see it. But the overall idea here was adding redstone to anything that can create a redstone signal. So the same applies for pressure plates. And then also tripwires. I also changed it. I believe the original recipe is cobblestone. I don't have the original recipes here yet, but I believe the original recipe is cobblestone, and I can actually check that real quick. No, the original recipe does take planks, so I guess that hasn't changed, but I did reformat it into a 2x2 just because it's kind of a simple recipe in the sense that it creates a simple item. I don't know. I could undo that and make it a 3x3, but I don't know. It seems like one of the more simple redstone components. So same with the lever, now requires redstone, and I want to be able to craft them on the go. The weighted pressure plates, same recipe, just add a piece of redstone. And then this is more of, instead of a challenge, it's more of a realism change. The way that a repeater looks is it looks like it's sitting on some sort of stone slab. So instead of 3 pieces of stone, I just have a half slab or a slab. And then some of this also applies to other things. Like here, I've got the comparator recipe, same idea. The daylight sensor, this is actually a harder version of the recipe with realism. Basically, it takes 1 glass pane because, the pane is the size of the top of the block. Has a lot of quartz, and then in order to make it balanced without adding more redstone, I added glowstone. It's an item that senses daylight. I think that makes sense. And then the unexpected thing that makes it a little bit more challenging, besides the glowstone, is the slab. I have it set up so that it only works with a dark oak slab, and that's because I chose dark oak in this case because it is such a dark color. And that's one of those things where, it kind of it forces you to go get a resource that normally you may or may not have, depending on where you're at in the game. Or you might not carry it with you constantly, or, it just makes you think a little bit more when you go to craft this item. Oh, I need, a special component. And that same idea it also applies to the note block, which is why in my Let's Play world I had such a crazy experience trying to craft up a lot of what I needed. This recipe specifically requires jungle planks. Again, I kind of did it based on the color. They're similar, so it requires the planks, which honestly I might change those to slabs. But then it also requires black wool. I figured it has black borders. Let's give it some black wool. And then also typical speakers would have that like black mesh in front of them. So I just thought that was kind of a cool addition to make it more realistic, but also more challenging. And then a jukebox is just add a diamond to a note block. And then a couple more of these. Piston has been changed to use slabs just because to me it doesn't make sense that the amounts. Like if it was just based on amounts, I would probably just have two slabs, the redstone, the iron, and one slab. But in order to keep it kind of a 3x3 with the symmetries and similarities to the original recipe, I just decided to do it like this, and then just went with slabs because it requires a little bit less. I could make it so that it creates 2 pistons, but I don't really want to do that, so I'm going to leave that as is. And then that same sort of logic kind of applies here. I use slabs just to kind of cut back on the amount of material that's going into a single block. So this is the dropper. I made it resemble the actual texture of the dropper. It kind of has that stone slab texture there, and then cobblestone up top. And then, it has the opening where it drops things out. So stone on top, stone slab on bottom, redstone because it's a redstone component. And then same recipe for the dispenser, just the addition of a bow. And then same kind of idea for the observer, but its texture is a little bit more interesting. It has a light texture on top, on the face, and on the bottom. So it has what I would consider 3 light faces and then 3 dark faces, which is why I have the 3 light faces. And then I'm just using cobblestone in the corners everywhere else, and then obviously the quartz and the redstone are just carryover from the original recipe. And the only other thing I have in this pack is alternate easier crafting recipes for the dispenser. Same amount of materials go in, same amount of materials come out, but basically this is the version that you can basically craft a whole stack at once. And that's one of the most tedious things to craft is dispensers. This just makes it so it's not as tedious. And then this is more of a convenience on the go kind of thing. You would have to have a bow on you in order to do this, but you can take an existing dropper, add a bow, and it turns it into a dispenser. So just kind of an overview of what I currently am running in my world, as well as how I'm keeping track of it. I'll do a follow-up video at some point that also shows how I test everything once I get to that phase. And basically, once I have something fully tested and I'm happy with all the recipes and everything, that's when it will show up on my website, which at this point I am still working on. I almost sat down and did it the other day, and I just didn't get to it. So soon, I promise. But anyways, until next time, thank you for watching, and have a nice day.